What he wants out of this meeting is to look tough, look like a deal maker, uh, but also he doesn't want in this meeting, I think, to look like he's bullying President Zelensky, which has been part of the unfortunate history of the lead up to all this, of course, with Zelensky's famous Oval Office visit in February.
The First Lady, Melania Trump, has threatened to sue Hunter Biden. Why? Why the price of Mounjaro is going to nearly double in the UK because of a complaint made by President Trump. And before all of that, of course, President Trump's been speaking ahead of his meeting with President Putin in Alaska tomorrow. We can go to Alaska now to speak to David Charter, the assistant US editor of The Times. David, hello.
Hello, Rosie from Anchorage. I am very far across the pond now.
Yes, absolutely. Well, we've been hearing from President Trump speaking ahead of his meeting with President Putin. He has said he's not going to be messed around by Putin.
President Putin would like to see a deal. I think if I weren't president, he would take over all of Ukraine. It's a war that should have never happened. If I weren't president, in my opinion, he would much rather take over all of Ukraine. But I am president, and he's not going to mess around with me.
David, we're getting such mixed messages from Donald Trump. He can say, he's not going to mess around with me. But then he says, 25% chance this isn't actually necessarily going to work. Or I might just get in there and think, I'll leave you two to it. Where do you think his head is actually at?
Well, I think he's leaving his options open, Rosie, because he doesn't really know how President Putin's going to play it. And he's at the back of his mind, I think, is this nervousness that it could go like the second summit that he tried with Kim Jong-un in Hanoi, the North Korean leader in his first term, where he thought they were getting along famously, but then when he turned up at the second summit with him, Kim asked for so much that he got angry and left, and there was no deal. And so that's at the back of everyone's minds here, I think, that there's a slight nervousness in the White House that Putin could just make too many demands and try once again to defer all the sanctions that Trump is threatening without really offering anything at all in return.
What does Donald Trump want? A deal? Peace? The peace prize? Sort of international praise?
Well, I think it's all of the above. But what he wants out of this meeting is to look tough, look like a deal maker, but also he doesn't want in this meeting, I think, to look like he's bullying President Zelensky, which has been part of the unfortunate history of the lead up to all this, of course, with Zelensky's famous Oval Office visit in February. That's in the past, and we're in the deal-making phase. And President Trump smells a deal, but he's also hedging his bet, saying that what's really got to happen is that Putin and Zelensky have got to get together, so there'll be a second summit. He actually said today it could even be in Alaska, and he could invite the European leaders. So he's sort of keeping all options open at this stage. So fundamentally, the answer to your question actually is he wants to be able to claim success tomorrow.
Yeah, and what that success will look like, we'll find out. David, what are we expecting in terms of just the kind of choreography of what happens tomorrow? We believe it will start about 8:30 UK time.
Yeah, we think there's a possibility of a greeting on the tarmac because Putin will arrive second. According to our information, at this US military airbase. It's quite extraordinary, isn't it, that he's going to a US military airbase that's really grown up into tens of thousands of personnel to guard against the threat from Russia. But that's what's happening. And after the greeting, we think there will be what normally happens in the Oval Office, where they sit down together and have take a few questions from the media pool. So that's the sort of select bunch of journalists who make it into the small group that ask questions in those Oval Office situations. So that could also happen. And then they'll go into a lunch and talks. And then it remains to be seen what happens afterwards. That's really open. The Russian side announced that there would be a joint press conference. The White House initially confirmed that, but then Trump, keeping his options open, later today has said he doesn't know how the press conference will go. If it doesn't go well, he'll have a quick press conference and go home.
Yes, well, we'll just and see. I mean, Donald Trump keeps talking about the fact that he thinks he's going to be able to read the Russian president, his sort of body language when they get face to face.
He does, but he's also, again, this is where he's hedging. George W. Bush famously said he looked Putin in the eyes and saw a man he could deal with. And then, of course, he couldn't deal with him. And that was seen as a mistake. So again, he said today, that sort of a suggestion was put to him about looking him in the eyes. And he said, well, yes, we'll be looking in the eyes, but more importantly, we'll be talking about how we get to peace.
Yeah. And there's been a text in from Steve in Maidenhead, David. He said, can I ask a really simple and perhaps an idiotic question? Why, whenever Trump talks about the Russian invasion of Ukraine, does he never seem to acknowledge that it was Russia that started this war? Why on earth does he seem to make out that both Russia and Ukraine are to blame? I think, actually, David, particularly when Donald Trump first was elected for the second time, people were quite alarmed with the quite cosy language that he was using to describe President Putin. That has shifted, but I think probably, is it fair to say, not as much as particularly European leaders were looking at and thinking, oh my gosh, this is not the kind of, very strident condemnation that we were hoping for.
It's not a simple question. It's a really good question. And there are, I think, several layers to the answer, including the fact that Trump thinks he's got a great personal relationship with Putin and doesn't want to jeopardize it unnecessarily. He sees that by on one level, avoiding the issue of blame or apportioning it to everybody. And remember, he talks about how Ukraine is to blame and how Biden was most to blame because it happened on his watch and he didn't do anything or enough to stop it. That this maintains good personal relations with Putin. But he's also playing to his core supporters, many of whom deeply resent the billions of dollars that America has spent sending aid and weapons, etc., to Ukraine, and there is among that base, and this is not widespread, but there is a core group in the Trump base who revile Zelensky and personally believe that he, do not have a strong opinion of his government, so we put it that way, very mildly. And so Trump is also trying to keep all sections of his base on board at the same time.
We got a sense of that, didn't we, in that just terrible meeting in the Oval Office, the huge row that ensued. Comparisons presumably will be made, David, between that meeting with Zelensky and the vice president and the atmosphere that we'll see tomorrow.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, this is a very unusual meeting. That we haven't had a Russian leader come to America for a decade, and there is a nervousness that because the Helsinki joint press conference did not go well for Trump after the last time they had a big summit in 2018. When, if you recall, Trump sided with the Russian view of the assessment of meddling in the 2016 election rather than his own security and intelligence services, who said Russia tried to swing the election or influence the election. So there was a big misstep there by Trump, and he had to clean up the next day and actually did say he misspoke. There will be a lot more reticence, I think, about going too far in this meeting. Basically, Trump is going to be on his best behavior, partly because he knows that actually, unlike the Zelensky Oval Office meeting until it blew up, this one really is going to be watched by the whole world. I mean, it is a global event.
Absolutely. And we'll be covering it for you here. And David, it'll be brilliant to have you checking in on Times Radio tomorrow as well. Should we move on to some other US stories? The First Lady, Melania Trump, has threatened to sue Hunter Biden because he made claims that she was first introduced to her husband by the sex offender Jeffrey Epstein. I mean, this is quite a row, David.
Yeah, and this is a very intriguing development because Melania Trump's lawyers have closed down this allegation from other media sources, that they've backed away and apologized after making it, but not Hunter Biden. He seems to be sticking by his guns. And also, interestingly, so far, not Michael Wolff, I think, the Trump biographer, who's also made this claim. And Hunter Biden has suggested that there is something that's not come out yet that will back up his line. We've got no evidence of that, I should say. And Melania Trump and her lawyers are absolutely determined to squash this because it doesn't fit with the narrative that we've had, for example, in her own book about how she met Donald when she actually wanted a night in, but one of her girlfriends persuaded her to come out, and that's when they first met at a club in New York.
She said her lawyers be seeking over $1 billion in damages. I mean, how serious is she about suing?
Oh, the threat of suing is absolutely serious. I mean, obviously, it would be up to a judge and possibly a jury to decide the level of damages if it came to that. But the enormous sums that are more reminiscent of the way her husband behaves in court cases, which is whenever backed in a corner, the Trumps fight back 10 times as hard, as you know. And this $1 billion figure is meant to be deeply scary to Hunter Biden, who, by the way, seems to have spent all his money several times over.
Talking about money and costs, let's move on to Mounjaro, the weight loss jab. The price here in the UK is going to nearly double. I mean, it's going to go up in some cases, depending on what dosage you be on. And I must be clear, this is if you were on a private prescription, not an NHS prescription, go up by 170%. And this is because Donald Trump complained he discovered the drug was being sold for a fraction of the price here in Europe compared to America. This is what he said in May.
A highly neurotic, brilliant businessman, seriously overweight, and he takes the fat shot drug. And he called me up and he said, President, he calls me, he used to call me Donald, now he calls me President, so that's nice respect. But he's a rough guy, smart guy, very successful, very rich. I wouldn't even know how we would know this, but because he's got comments. Said, President, could I ask you a question? What? I'm in London, and I just paid for this damn fat drug I take. I said, it's not working. He said, I just paid $88. And in New York, I pay $1,300. What the hell is going on?
The president clearly was unhappy about that. He was talking about one of his friends. And David, it means the prices are going up.
Yeah, so I think the bottom line of this whole debate is that the US market is much more important for Eli Lilly, the makers of this drug, than the UK market. And so UK consumers, users of this, are going to have to suck it up if they want to carry on using it. By the way, most people are saying that there are other weight loss drugs that they might switch to now because their prices seem reasonable in comparison. But in a way, it's proving that Trump had a point, isn't it? Because he was very angry that American consumers were being asked to pay more. And he sent very stiff letters, not just to Eli Lilly, but to a whole bunch of pharmaceutical companies recently, warning them that there would be big trouble unless they altered their prices. And this is the drug company getting in line. And so any lower costs that are seen around the world, in Europe and Britain in particular, which is cheaper than Europe as well, that's the sacrifice that's going to have to be made in order to keep the drug companies access to the American market.